Hi, my name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested. I've been working on cleaning up this Olympia SM3 from 1957, and one of the problems that it has had is fairly extensive white rust infiltration. Now that zinc oxide forms on the surface of steel that's got decent zinc content in it, and it's the powdery white stuff that is just kind of difficult to get rid of. In this particular case, it's on these intermediate levers here, which I'm going to deal with in a bit, but it was also below the keytops here. So after having gone through and done all the work to clean those, I thought it would be useful to show you the sort of thing necessary to do that job. And the SM3, you'll note, if you look carefully, you can see that it's got these little brackets down here, and if I push down on the keytop, you'll see that it moves just a little bit. So there's a spring underneath each of these. That means that the removal of the keytops is not only doable, but also fairly easy, something that can't be said for other typewriters. So let me go ahead and show you how that's accomplished on this particular typewriter. Now the front row is easy. The next are going to be a little bit harder because of access issues, but they're all done pretty much the same way, and I'll go through one in each row just to show you. So let's take a look at this particular letter here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to elevate this up, and let me then reposition. Well, first let's stuff this under it to keep it from falling. In this case, that'll be a wadded up paper towel. And note that this particular typewriter needs space below it in order to operate. So if you decide to uncase this and work on it, you need to make sure that you take that into account and put something under the sides here to give you some room to work. Okay, zoom in a bit so I can show you exactly what I'm doing. Pardon the angle here, but this is the best I'm going to be able to do with a particular camera setup. So I'm working on this one right here. So the spring here is in a little cup that's mounted between this bracket and snaps over the protrusion on the key lever. What you have to do to remove this is depress that spring in, pivot the key out, and then you can pull the key off. Now, it may be easier to push the key lever down before you start, but it's not really necessary for the first row. So now let me take this apart for you. There we go. So you see the little ring there. You see that the bracket here is bent a little bit, shaped. So you'll have to have this follow the angle as you take it off, and it can get jammed up because there's not a whole lot of clearance. So here's the little cup. It's not a very substantial thing. Let me zoom out a bit so this will be easier to see. So there's the little cup. Here is the spring. And there is the key. There we go. Now, to clean this off, the zinc oxide needs a slightly acidic solution in order to be able to neutralize it and, as they say, to repassivate the surface. That is, to restore the protection that is provided by the zinc for the steel. So what I have here is a small jar of vinegar. And you don't have to take this apart. You can put it in just as it is, since the plastic in this case is white N molded, and then a second, this is what it's called, double shot molded, and then a second molding of brown plastic around it. So the N is not paint, so there's nothing to damage. And vinegar won't harm plastic unless you leave it in there for an exceedingly long period of time, because it's packed in plastic bottles. And kind of all depends on what it is. So you leave it sit in there for a minute or two, and that helps to loosen up the zinc oxide and get rid of the worst of it. And if it's really powdery, you should brush it off before you dump it in. Then I will take the little bottom off here, if I can get it to come. As I said, it's all about the angles. Come on. Doesn't help when your fingers are wet. Okay. There we go. Then I would take this and just kind of rub it with my fingers on the cloth I use here. That would take most everything off. And for really, if there was still some white residue on the side, I would take my bronze brush and just rotate it around and gently scrape that off. Then I would take a Q-tip and swab out the middle to clean off any remaining residue and end up with normally a very clean part. Then I do the same here, and starting with the Q-tip, just kind of clean everything off that I can. And if there's white residue, then I would take and I would try to brush that off a bit. Not being fairly aggressive, just trying to get the oxide to come off. Now here's the important point. After you've done this, you have now compromised the structure of the rust protection again. So you should dump that back in the vinegar for about a minute. It doesn't take long, it's just a small, just a light chemical reaction to restore the integrity of the surface of the metal. Dry it off best you can. The vinegar will evaporate on its own. Put it back in. Put it back together. Come on. Try to get around that last angle, and it will pop back from time to time. Now, I need to put it back into the typewriter. So let me get this thing centered around that key. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this down. I'm going to now note the direction here. So I'm going to put this over the hook, squeeze the spring in, and rotate it around the top, and you'll hear it click into place. And just like that, it's back on. Now, the ones in this row are a little harder to do, and usually what I like to do is jam a couple of keys up so that I have room above to work. In this case, my fingers aren't going to do the job. I have to use a pair of pliers to be able to push that cup up so that I can rotate it down and pull it off. And there we go, just like that. And the reverse going back on. Just like I did before, a little push to get around the corner. Snaps into place. The next row is much more difficult. I want you to note something here. Let me get this out of the way so I can bring the typewriter back down. If you'll note, let's see if I can show this correctly. This might work. So you can see that here we have the key lever here and the spring on top of it. And the key lever comes down and back. Now, in the case of the second row is the same. In the case of the third row, it comes forward and then down and back. And it looks like you're supposed to pivot the key back onto the open part of the key lever. But that is not the case. You actually can't move it in that direction. So all the keys will pivot forward on their respective key levers. Now this one takes a little bit more effort. So let me go ahead and stand this back up again. Bring the camera back up. Just last time. In this case, I am going to lock 2 keys down. So jam them up and make sure that they're all the way down. I'm going to reach in, push the button in, and try to get the key to rotate back. Now, the reason that I want to jam the keys down is because I have to have room to be able to pivot the key. And that means that those have to be out of the way and I have to hold the type bar up. So now that I've got that, I have to put the typewriter back down. If I don't move everything out of the way. So you can see I've got the key sitting kind of cattywampus. Get over there. Hey, having to keep a camera in place. Now, what I have to do here is I have to make some room so that I can slide the key directly up over the, let me see if I can show you. So I have the key here off of the type bar. Now I have to push it back and slide it up over this little hump here. To do that, I have to again compress the spring. And I'm going to use a pair of pliers to do that. So just push it in, hold it, slide the key top back, and then bring it up off over the type bar. And to put it back in, it's exactly the reverse of that. Compress the type bar. Make sure you have the key orientation correct. And it helps to hold this key lever up. Get it all the way down past the little ledge there. There we go. Now, stand the typewriter up again. Here. Where am I working? Which one? That one. Okay. Bring the camera where it belongs. So now, I'm going to take my pliers, get in here, push that down so I can rotate it forward and have it snap into place. Bring it back down. And there we go. Now, one thing to note, there are some keys you're going to have some trouble on. I had particular problems with this key getting it off. These were actually a little bit easier than the ones on the third row. And the shift keys are a little bit different. They're a little bit bigger and things are a little bit harder to work with. But everything still comes off the same way. So you want to take these off. Remember, everything pivots forward regardless of how the type bars are oriented. And you will need something in order to push the spring down with a little bit of reach, because you'll never get your fingers under here. So that's the removal, replacement of the key tops and the appropriate cleaning material. And vinegar is good for quite a bit, and you can tell that I've used this a lot because it's fairly cloudy. Most of the particulates will eventually settle to the bottom. Now, the next thing I have to do is get in here and get these intermediate levers out. In order to do that, I'm going to have to take off all the type bars, the intermediate links, and the levers themselves. And that's going to be a little bit of a process. It's not difficult, it's just involved. So one unique thing about the Olympia, if I can show it to you here, is that you see right down here, there's this little pin. That is meant to block the fulcrum wire from moving either direction. There's one on both sides. And you'll also notice that over here, there's a cap that has to be removed to get at the fulcrum wire. That's both decorative and practical. So this is simply a pin which you squeeze together on the bottom, turn 90 degrees and pull out. So it's almost a cotter pin. That's what I'm going to get started on next when I get done with this video here. And I may or may not document that process. I don't know. It's going to be fairly tedious, but I might show it just for the sake of education. And when I have everything out here, I will then take the opportunity to really clean the typewriter, because after all the type bars and levers are out, everything under here is going to be accessible, and the only hard part is going to be the carriage and the subcarriage and the escapement. So there you have it. Cleaning key tops on an Olympia SM3. Once again, my name is Wayne, and this is Type Tested.